So, we live in a world of credit. Usually, many of the credit card companies, they give us a point, meaning you're using the credit card, whatever it is, and you accumulate points. And then you reach a point, you have so much that you get all those gifts, etc., etc. Some credit companies, they allow you to use points even in the sense of purchasing. You go ahead and you purchase flight ticket and you use points, correct? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes you have companies that allow you to do a regular gasoline or other needs with points. Why I'm using this example? Because in our discussion, which maybe on the surface looks complicated, but I'm telling you it's not, it's just to understand the concept. The concept is we have a different category of betrothal. We have one category that we know all the way back is just a regular engagement and marriage. Then we have a concept we learned in the past several weeks, which is ייבום and וחליצה. Now we go to the next step. We learn about ma'amar and about get. And we explain that ma'amar, it's a first stage of some final sincerity of marriage, some letter of intent in that sense. And there is the next concept is the get, that it's a release, the same as וחליצה, disconnected from that relationship. In a way, I think it will help us to think that you have a credit card that tells us, look, if you want to purchase a flight ticket, imagine you're dealing with those big companies and you want to fly overseas, right? So they said to you, you can use your points up to 50% of the tickets. So if the ticket costs you, for example, $1,000, so you use the valuation of point up to $500, and then the others you have to use the regular credit card. All right? Why I'm using that example? Because soon you see how effective is ma'amar and get in this type of relationship. How? Amar Rava, page 51. Mai ta'ama de Rabban Gamliel, de misapka le get idachi ilodachi, ma'amar idachi ikane ilokane. Why? We said earlier, yesterday, that en get achar get, meaning one bill of divorce, and you bring another one, the second one it's in a way meaningless. And the same applies to ma'amar after ma'amar. Ma'amar, we explained that it's a first either letter of intent, cash, etc., etc. Now, if you have the combination of these two opposites, which is get and ma'amar, so it's a question if you have this act of zikaban or not zikaban. For example, if you have two yevamim or two yevamot, so you said that it's no such a thing according to Rabban Gamliel. No get after the get, ma'amar achar ma'amar, which means Rashi said that the yavam that brought the second get or did the second ma'amar, as far as the relationship, meaning marriage with the immediate relative of the yevamah, so it's not a problem, it's not any prohibition, because according to the sages, it is a concept of get after get, ma'amar after ma'amar. So therefore, the get is not totally annulled the zikaban, and the ma'amar is not completed the ייבום. For those who know in this subject, let's explain another point. If we have a Reuven and Shimon, two brothers, and Reuven married, for our understanding, Tamar and Esther. Reuven passed away. Now it's Shimon in the picture. Shimon went ahead and he did ma'amar, which means he expressed in his letter of intent that he planning to marry Tamar. Okay? Here at this point we ask a question. It was not a matter of ייבום, but it was the first stage of relationships, because he brought her that letter or that money. Okay? So therefore, they have, how do you say it, 50% of the credit card used, or 50% of the points used. Okay, but it's not completion of ייבום. So since they still have the zikat ייבום, because remember, after he did it, he did a lot of other things that you may call it not nice things, right? Because he dealt with the other woman and he did other things, okay? So therefore, we say that as far as the relationship between Shimon and Tamar, since it was originally ma'amar, it was the first stage of relationship, so therefore they still have zikat ייבום. So therefore, the big question here left, how come the second did not have an effect? Because remember, we said yesterday that after he did ma'amar, he went ahead and he gave, can be the get to the other one, did ma'amar with the other one, did all kind of things, have a cohabitation with the other one. So all kind of things he did after he did the ma'amar with the first one, right? So they said get, Rava elaborates, and he said get, idachi, ilo dachi, ikama dachi, batramai kavid. So if you tell me that the effect of the get is 100%, so the second one, it's meaningless. Ikama lo dachi, if you tell me the first get, it's not have an effect, batraname lo dachi. So it's meaningless, the second. So either way you look, it's like playing chess, right? The second one, it's meaningless. Ma'amar, ikane, ilokane. The same manner. If ikama kane, batravai kavid, vikama lo kane, batraname lo kane. So it means that any way you look, either ma'amar, either get or ma'amar, as far as the second one is concerned, is meaningless. So why you need all these sfeikot? Tosfot explain that all these point of Rabban Gamliel that speaks about get after get, it's in a way we better understand. But as far as ma'amar, after ma'amar, if you tell me that the intent, the letter of intent of the first one have an effect, so if you have get after ma'amar, it's not the issue. But if it's the other way around, it's an issue. So the other way around meaning, if he give a get of divorce, bill of divorce, and then he institute ma'amar, that's the issue. But if it's the other way around, it's not. So Eiti ve'abaye, model Rabban Gamliel, שיש get אחר get, שיש get אחר ma'amar, meaning this fellow Shimon, he did ma'amar first, and then he did get. So he hold that it's effective. ומאמר אחר הגט, מאמר אחר הגט, so which means he did ma'amar in one of the Yevamot, can be Tamar, can be Esther, can be another one. A person in those days can be several wives, and then he did ma'amar in one of them, and then he gave get to the second one. So that get, according to that view, has an effect, and therefore the first one is no longer valid to have ייבום, and therefore it's not just told her, it's also the immediate family connected to her is prohibited to him. So therefore, if he gave get to one of them, and then he did ma'amar the second one, so this ma'amar is in effect, and she needs, in addition to וחליצה, also get, in order to release her. That's the way Rashi explained to us. So that's, we understand how Rava matched Rabban Gamliel, because it can be that the get have an effect and ma'amar not, or vice versa. So therefore, both ways, it's the challenging point. Ma'amar achar get, v'get achar bi'ah u'ma'amar. That's again, imagine you have this Tamar, Esther, Tzipora, 3. Okay, so he did ma'amar with the first one, with Tamar, and then he have cohabitation with Esther, and then he gave get to Tzipora. Interesting guy, right? So now we ask, is that get has an effect? The answer is yes. And yes meaning that all the relatives of that woman, meaning those three, are not sisters, are just wives. So all the immediate family of Esther are prohibited to that fellow, to Shimon. And since he did ma'amar with Tamar, which is the first one, so the cohabitation with the second one, it's considering, as we said yesterday, bi'ah psula, which means something that it's ineffective, invalid. So therefore, the get that was given to the third one has an effect. So basically what you see here, when you have this type of be'ilot, it's not bi'at ייבום, and then you go by uma'amar achar bi'ah veget, which means he gave get to one, and then he have cohabitation with the second one, and then indeed a ma'amar with the third one. So the ma'amar has an effect, and she need a separate get, and he is prohibited to all of her immediate family. Okay? So in a sense, you see the I don't know if it's the right word, the metaphor or the euphemism of credit cards, because in the mindset, in the logical mindset, it's like saying to a customer, you can use 50% of the purchase with points, and 50% you have to buy with a credit card. Meaning, in a sense, the get has the 50% effect, which is 100% in a sense, because it may turn that we accumulate points that have the evaluation of the 50% of the ticket. And the same ma'amar, but just the other way around. Okay? Which means, before the ma'amar or the get, ותקנה, דהתנן, הבעילה, בזמן שבתחילה אין אחריה כלום. Which means the moment that cohabitation was first, so if, for example, he gave first get, and then she's basically, she in our mindset is like you put a fence around her, and she's no longer, neither she nor her relatives, right? So the bi'ah and the ma'amar that took place afterward, it's meaningless. If you tell me that the get is not effective, so the cohabitation after that, it's considering bi'ah batchila, and the ma'amar that follow it in a subsequent order is not in effect. So why Rabban Gamliel hold that this ma'amar has an effect? So they said, El amar Abaye, le'olam pshita le Rabban Gamliel beget dedachi. So here we learn a new concept. And the concept is, we call it דחייה במקצת. דחייה במקצת meaning in part. In part meaning not totally. So it's obvious to Rabban Gamliel that the get, the bill of divorce, produces certain type of relationship, certain type of Levirate marriage, but it precludes the Levirate marriage because that Levirate betrothal acquires the Yevamah in a manner of part. U ma'amar dekanei, again, the same ma'amar, it's partially effective, not totally, which is, again, the credit card point has some meaning. It's good for you to accumulate those points, okay? So for our understanding, I'm just using euphemism, right? So for our understanding, if you have get and you have ma'amar, it carries some effect, but it's not a complete action, which is, according to the sages, has partially an effect. And therefore, if after the get it's a manner of cohabitation or ma'amar, so here you have this point of Rabban Gamliel that he said that anything that takes place after that carries the final effect. So he said, Miu amur Rabbanan, היבמה בחד צד מהנה בגט, ובחד צד מהנה במאמר. Remember what we said? In one side, you said that this get has an effect of rejection, and the other way, ma'amar, it's partially, in a way, commitment between the two. And therefore, get, achar get lo dachi, second one doesn't have an effect there. Dacha lekama, because the first one already took place. ומאמר לאחר מאמר לא קני דאקנה לקמה. גט אחר מאמר ומאמר אחר גט המילתא לקדחי והמילתא קיקני. Because when you have first מאמר, so by that manner of the מאמר, she is already in our simple language acquired this yevama, but part of the zikah band still there, because the מאמר is not totally have an effect. So the get that's followed that other yevama has an effect to disconnect the zikaban as it was originally. Now v'rabanan kol chad v'chad takinu l'rabanan get u'ma'amar b'yevama. So in a sense, you don't have the power, the independent power of each of them. So what you can do is, according to the Rabban Gamliel, the ma'amar of one has partially an effect, but doesn't have a full ability to have total effect. And according to the sages, each of them has, in a sense, 100%. And he said, ורבנן, כל אחד ואחד תקינו רבנן, גט ומאמר ביבמה. So each of them independently has its total power. So therefore, the first get, its total manner of rejection, like a manner of regular get, and therefore its total created boundaries around all the other yevamot from all these yevamim. So that's the stages. But the get that happened, it's only partially, because the other yevamot, it still have connection to him. Now, so the Gemara asked a basic question, said, "V'hai bi'a psula adifa mima'amar." So, since Abaya go to explain to us the idea of Rabban Gamliel teaching and this invalid intercourse, which means the intercourse that perform after the disqualifying action, for example, levirate betrothal, like ma'amar or bill of divorce, is superior to levirate betrothal, and he said ugri'a ma'amar. So I explain in my book on Rashi. Rashi said here, it's a long explanation. He said, כלומר, להכי אמר רבן גמליאל, יש גט אחר ביאה שאחר מאמר, ויש מאמר אחר ביאה וגט, דעה ביאה אמצעית שהיא פסולה, עדיף אמר וגרע במאמר. So, originally speaking, Abaye explained Rabban Gamliel, and then he explained Rabbanan, and therefore what you see in the continuation of Braita, it's appear like a continuation of what Rabbanan said. And Rashi said, no, Habiya Psula, and he used the word Klomar, he says, no, now he goes back to Rabban Gamliel and explain what he said, that the get that come Biya after Ma'amar has an effect. It's because they have Biya Emtzait, that it's Biya Emtzait Psula Adif Mi Ma'amar. So I elaborate here. Anyway, so עדיף ממאמר, דילו מאמר אחר מאמר לא מהנה, ואילו ביאה אחר מאמר מהנה. So, וגריעה ממאמר, דילו מאמר אחר גט כאן לכו לשיעור הדגט, וביאה אחר הגט לא כאן לכו לשיעור הדגט. So, המאמר that follow subsequently have an effect. תנו רבנן. Now we elaborate on this disputation between Rabban Gamliel and the sages. כיצד אמר רבן גמליאל אין גט אחר גט? How Rabban Gamliel said that the get, the bill of divorce, is not effective after another one. שתי יבמות שנפלו לפי יבם אחד. You have two יבמות, two wives, that before one person. So again, ראובן שמעון, ראובן passed, Reuven have Tamar and Esther, and Shimon is now in a state of 2 Yevamot. Venatan, or you can have another case, which is Levi have the 2 brothers that passed, and each of them has a wife, meaning surviving wife. Okay? So they said, Venatan get lazo, veget lazo. So he gave get to each of them. רבן גמליאל אומר חולץ לראשונה ואסור בקרובותיה. רבן גמליאל, what he said basically you have to have וחליצה because they have the status of ייבום. So if you don't wish to do ייבום, you have to do וחליצה. The moment you did וחליצה, then all the relatives of her is under the boundary that prohibited to him, follow Leviticus 18.
So it seemed the get in the second place was unnecessary. However,
That's what we argued so far.
But once it's given, though, it carries all the stringencies.
Correct.
So.
But the point, you remember the credit card? Remember the credit card?
Yeah, no, I understand.
That's the argument.
But right, so
how far you go with the point of credit? How far you go with the point? Do you say that the point has a 50%, 50%, or you said that the sage is the full?
Well, it seems interesting because this time, I mean, it's more just the stringencies. They don't really, I mean, it doesn't.
Remember, what's the difference between get and וחליצה?
I mean, in general, וחליצה is given to a ייבום, or ייבום Yevama gives to, in the case of ייבום, when she doesn't,
right,
when they're not going, when ייבום is not made.
The thought of it.
Right, to end the zikah bond,
Okay.
essentially.
Get.
And a get is a divorce, so there has to be some sort of marriage agreement in place. Something a little more than just a zikah bond.
Excellent.
So ma'amar is that extra thing that makes it more like a marriage than a zikah bond.
So how you define so far?
Mm-hmm.
How you define as far as the credit card percentage, the difference between ma'amar and ייבום, or get and וחליצה?
Well, ייבום, once you perform ייבום, it's 100%. You're married.
All right, and 100% meaning not just told here,
but all the stringencies of the co-wives as well.
Yeah. Our main discussion is not just the effect of the ייבום or וחליצה. Our main discussion is the relatives. Here,
right,
his immediate family.
Right. And that's why I say that it carries the stringencies, even though the get wasn't necessary. Once you gave it, you have all the stringencies as if you'd actually divorced
Let's go first to Mama. Mama.
Right.
So what happened now? The relative of her, the moment he did Mama, what's the status now?
There's a little more than a zikah bond. There's an agreement that they're going to get married.
Because you know why? Because the zikah bond happened naturally by the passing, and this is the survival.
It exists.
You have a zikah bond.
Right.
Versus mama, that the person initiated something.
Right.
So now he has some effect of something. But my goal of using the credit card, it's because the mindset of those companies is not for you as a customer to use the credit card points. They want you to use the credit card and not pay.
And pay them the interest, yeah.
And then they gain the interest. That's the whole goal, right?
Yep.
Now, lehavdil, right? But for our discussion, the idea of the Torah put the frame of ייבום and וחליצה, that's the frame. Because in general, we have Leviticus 18, with all the prohibition with the immediate family.
And
the moment you have
rabbinic.
ma'amar or get, you enter the domain of points, right? So you enter the domain of points. Now you have all these complications because how far you go. Zikah happened naturally. Ma'amar happened as initiation of a person. The same applies to get. You have to have the person not just consent, but he needs to initiate get a ma'amar in order to make the relationship happen either way. Right? So here
Judaism's the only religion I think that you can actually ask the question of how married are you?
Correct. Yes. Or how divorced are you?
Or how divorced are you? Yes.
Very good.
I mean, it's like you can actually be partially married.
You can be partially married.
Well, when you get ma'amar, it's like you're essentially. I mean, you're not, but you're partially married because the only way you have to give a get to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
in America, you have the concept of which I just learned here. I never know that before. It's called legally separated.
Right.
Right? Because in this system, you know,
I guess that's
people
partially divorced.
How J.K. Mason
So
said.
you consider partially divorced in Judaism. Partially divorced.
You know, J.K.
Yeah.
Mason used to say, "What is American Jewry?" To me, it's not just Jewry, but he says they wake up in the morning and think, "Whom should I sue today?" So what happened is in this system, what happened? The reality, right?
Yeah.
So you go to this unbelievable, horrible court system that people don't want to bother to divorce, right? Unfortunately, people live together and do all kind of things because they don't want to bother with this. So you have people who separated forever, right? So it's just the way it is, right? Because they don't want to pay, or it's too much, or they can afford, or the alimony and the child support, the ta. So it's legally separated now. It's a new term. Mm-hmm. Which is not even, I understand it's not even in a court system, right? It's not recorded in a court system.
No, actually, it is. It is? It is, right. Because, like, for example, in Maryland and in Virginia is the same way, is you have to have a year of legal separation before you can actually get a divorce. So you have to actually file papers at the time that you start the separation, so that you know.
And when that year comes, they send you that
then you can get then you can go through the process. You got to go through the process of getting a divorce, but you have to wait a year of being legally separated.
Because there's responsibilities.
Right, but I mean, you have to legally declare when the separation started, so that you know when the year is up, so then you can proceed with the divorce.
But I understand that.
So there's actually papers that you fill out.
The difference between divorce and separation, tell me if I'm right, that's what I heard. That separation, she doesn't need, or he doesn't need to consent fully. Versus a divorce, they need to go to a notion of court and get the final consent. Something like that.
I mean,
yes.
I mean, there has to be mutual consent that you both want to get separated. I mean, there has to be mutual consent that you want to be separated, that both of you want to be separated.
But it have to be in paper.
But you have to file papers to do it. But I mean, the point is, though, that if you decide during that year that you want to...
No, if the other side not respond.
Well, but by the fact, if they've already gone, they've already agreed to the separation. I mean, if they've left, right? If they've left, then they agreed to the separation.
But that's different. In a Torah law...
Right, I understand. It's different.
That's the difference, right?
No, I understand that. But I mean, the difference of the legally separated is that any time during that year, they can decide to get back together and they don't have to do anything. They just get back together, and the marriage continues. They don't have to file any papers or anything like that. So
anyway,
but not legally separated is when the court isn't recognizing and keeping.
You haven't documented the time, right?
But if you put it in the court, if you document it in the court, you still not divorce until you go there and say, when the year up,
that's correct. Then you got to, then once the year is up, then you can actually file for divorce. But then you've still got to go through that divorce process. I mean, it doesn't. Okay. That year of separation doesn't.
So the separation, you still have to file it.
I mean, my understanding is the concept, the reason behind the law is obviously they're trying to discourage as much divorce, and so they want to give that year of like, all right, guys, see if you can work this out. Separate, see if you can make this marriage actually
the
work.
Midrash said.
I mean, it's really what it would be the ideal outcome.
Money involved with being in the court system.
Yeah, well, I mean, from their perspective, true. But I think that if you look at it, the pure reason behind the law is they would rather you essentially got back together and continue the marriage. Especially if this kid's
how do you spell the word ish and isha? Ish is aleph yud shin, and isha, right? Aleph shin hey.
Right.
So they said when you have ish ve'isha, so if they zachu, if they have the name of Hashem, which is a yud, yud is one of the name of Hashem, yud, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they help each other, right? If it's taken, right? So you have the word esh, meaning fire.
Right.
Yep.
Anyway, you see why I get to that discussion, because I wanted to get the mindset, the havdil, that it's partially and not fully either way, right?
So if you take Hashem out of Ish and Isha, then you end up with Ish, because the Yud and the Yud and the Hey.
The Midrash said it. That's over. Then they have. You can't imagine, in my experiences, in my job, the family feud is nothing worse than that. Worse than outside enemies.
Or domestic
It's just
it can be so ugly. I mean,
unbelievable. All right.
Well,
anyway.
you understand that whole thing of the two emotions of love and hate being very, very close. They're not opposite emotions. So it's when you love someone a great deal that you get married. It's when the emotions go the other way. It's very strong in the other direction as well. It's sad, but it's.
But Rabbi, you asked the question with the Myanmar. Well, how does that affect the relatives? That's.
Yes. So the thing is, the moment they have this type of letter of intent, is automatically created the boundaries and the bond between the two.
Right.
And therefore, if
it's like a marriage.
18,
no, I understand.
Therefore, all the closest relatives of her cannot be married with him. Okay, so Rabban Gamliel said, "Shtei Yevamot."
Including if she had any co-wives.
Right, that was the question.
שתי יבמות שנפלו לפני יבם אחד, very good, ונתן גט לזו וגט לזו, רבן גמליאל חולץ לראשונה, ואסור בקרובותיה, ומותר בקרובות שנייה. Okay? Because the second get has no effect. So the וחליצה of the second one is good to exempt both of them, and the get, the second one, is no effect. So that's basically, according to Rashi, is just Rabban Gamliel give us a good advice that he should do purposely the וחליצה with the first one, and therefore, if he does that in a proper procedure, the relative of the second one he can marry to, because if he do וחליצה for the second one, so therefore the first one, considering his divorcee, his ex because of the get, and the second one considering his חלוצה, and therefore he is prohibited not only to them, but also to all of their relatives of both women.
So you should do get and וחליצה on the first one. Is what they're saying. Once he's given a get, he should just give וחליצה.
Yeah, but וחליצה to the first one.
To the first one. That's the one he gave the get to. Right.
So that's Rabban Gamliel. It's a very good advice. Okay? And therefore, חולץ הראשונה אסור בקרובותיה, מותר בקרובות שנייה. So it's not totally out of a picture. It can go to a relative of the second. חכמים רואים, the majority of the sages said, נתן גט לזו וגט לזו, אסור בקרובות שתיהם. Why? Because the two gets have an effect. So therefore, it makes no difference which one of them he does וחליצה. וחליצה לאחת מהם. כיצד אמר רבן גמליאל, אין מאמר אחד מאמר. שתי יבמות שנפלו לפני יבם אחד. You have two with one. ועשה מאמר בזו ומאמר בזו. רבן גמליאל אומר, נותן גט לראשונה וחולץ לה. ואסור בקרובותיה. He give get to the first one, and וחליצה. And there, the relatives, he cannot connect it to a relative, because the get is basically disconnected with the מאמר of the first one, and וחליצה is this bond, the zikah of both one. And והחכמים אומרים, the majority of the sages said, נותן גט לשתיהן. So, meaning each of them receive get separately from him. And since they hold that you have מאמר after מאמר, so it's the second מאמר has an effect, and therefore ואסור בקרובות שתיהן, וחליצה לאחת מהם. וכן אתה אומר, בשני יבמים ויבמה אחת. The same way, if the two יבמים gave one יבמה get, one after the other, so Rabban Gamliel maintained that the get of the second Yavam is an account, and he permitted to marry her relatives. And the majority of the sages hold that it's effective and it's rendered him forbidden to her relatives. אמר מר, נותן גט לזו וגט לזו. רבן גמליאל אומר, חולץ לראשונה ואסור בקרובותיה ומותר בקרובות שנייה. So according to Rabban Gamliel, the get that was given to the second Yevamah has no effect. It's like he didn't give anything. So it means, according to the Rabban Gamliel's view, וחליצה that was given to the one who received the get, it's in effect not just to her, but also exempt the co-wife that not received the get. למה תהווה תיובתא דשמואל, דאמר שמואל, חלץ לבעלת גט, לא נפטרה צרה. So this is part of our discussion. If you remember, we talk a lot about the zikah, etc. So the zikah of the co-wife, the zikah bond is much less than the first one. So therefore וחליצה of the one who received the get is considering וחליצה גרועה, which means inferior וחליצה, in regards to, if you compare it to the other tzara. So Shmuel hold that inferior וחליצה, it's not disvalid the zikah ban of the co-wife, that she have a stronger zikah than her. So since the second get is not in effect, so the zikah of the second Yevamah, it's in full in compared to the first one. That's the way Rashi tells us. חלץ לבעלת הגט לא נפטרה צרה. אמר לך שמואל כי אמרי אנא, what they say that the בעלת הגט not exempt the צרה, ליבא דמאן דאמר, יש זיקה. ורבן גמליאל סבר, אין זיקה. It's an old story. We studied it, if you remember, at length previously, page 27 and more. We're going to study it in page 109, but the idea is, according to Rabban Gamliel, the zikah of the ייבום, it's not considering a husband-wife relationship. It means that there is a potential out there to have a full manner of marriage. But since it's nothing in effect, so that zikah bond is en zikah. It's not a marriage effective. They have some type of biblical concept that they can get married, but unlike the other that hold the zikah, that it's strong and they said it's the same as marriage, here it's not. So therefore you have a difference between superior and inferior וחליצה. ומאיר דרבן גמליאל סבר אין זיקה, and since Rabban Gamliel hold that the liberate bond is not substantial. Page 51b, רבנן סברי יש זיקה. So Rashi tells us, להקשו יעתי, כלומר, כי סלקא דתך דכי יחי דפליגי רבן גמליאל בגט אחר גט, הכי פליגי בזיקה, אף אגב דממילתאי לא שמינן לי. Here, again, you have a difference between Rashi and Ramban and Rashba. The big question is if you depend on the Mishnah, if yesh zikah or en zikah or not. Because according to Rabban Gamliel to hold en zikah, so it's enough to have ma'amar or get in order to reject totally the yavam or the other one. But the Rabbanan, or the sages who hold that it is a zikah, so each get has an effect. That's the way the Ramban and Rashba explain. But the assumption here is the same way as the sages disputed Rabban Gamliel in regards to get after get, so they also disputed in regard to zikah, even it's not clear from the Mishnah, and I think that's what Rashi meant. So the same way that you said that there is a disputation between Rabban Gamliel and the sages in case of two Yevamot that came before one Yavam, so it's also if you have one Yevamah that fell before two. So according to the sages, if each of them gave a get, so the other one can do וחליצה and release the zikah of the second Yavam. לימא דבתיובתא דרבא בר אבונה אמר רב, דאמר רבא בר אבונה אמר רב, וחליצה פסולה צריכה לחזור על כל האחים. So he hold that if you make invalid וחליצה by one of the brothers, so it's not release the zikah of Yevamah for the others, even the inferiority of all the brothers are equal. Mm-hmm. We basically discussed that on the page 26, and it's based on the idea of yesh zikah. Anyway, אמר לך רבא בר אבונה בן לרבן גמליאל בן לרבנן סברי אין זיקה והכה גט אחר גט ומאמר אחר מאמר כמפליגי. אמר, you have here two יבמות before the one יבם. עשה מאמר בזו ומאמר בזו. If you perform a levirate betrothal with each and every one of them. רבן גמליאל אומר נותן גט לראשונה בכל אצלה ואסור בקרובותיה ומותר בקרובות שנייה. As we said earlier, the case is the first one. So he cannot do ייבום with the first, but he needs to have purposely the get and וחליצה. מכדי כסבר רבן גמליאל אין מאמר אחר מאמר. ראשונה נמי תתייבם דילמה. So basically because she is not disqualified as a result of that ma'amar. So why Rabban Gamliel require to release her? Because according to the sages that said that it's the second ma'amar has an effect, so we understand because he did ma'amar in both of them. So it's like, by rabbinic view, it's like someone who built two separate houses. But according to Rabban Gamliel, that said that the second ma'amar is not in effect, so he can do the ייבום with the first one. So he said, גזירת דילמה אטל ייבום אל השנייה. So therefore, he is in the rabbinic violation of building of two homes. As we said many times, that it's only one he can do. אמר רבי יוחנן, רבן גמליאל ובית שמאי ורבי שמעון בן עזאי ורבי נחמיה כולו הסבירו לו, מאמר קונה קניין גמור. All of them said that levirate betrothal acquires the Yevamah as the full-fledged acquisition, like in a sense, like a regular betrothal. And he said, Rabban Gamliel had amaran, because levirate betrothal is not effective after levirate betrothal. So basically, Rabbi Yochanan maintains that since you have the second levirate betrothed, it's not effective because she was already full acquired by the first one. Beit Shammai Ditnan, we learn it in page 29, Shlosha Achim. You have three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Shnayim mehem, which is Reuven and Shimon, nesuin l'shtei achayot. Let's call them Rachel veLeah. Achayot. So, ve'echad Levi mufne. Levi is single. Met echad mibaalei achayot. If Reuven passed away, ve'asav mufne ma'amar, and Levi came in, he's a single, and you have ma'amar with that sister-in-law. ואחר כך מת אחיו השני, and then he was not yet married, the wife, the Rachel, the wife of Reuven, and now Shimon passed away. So it means that the wife of Shimon fell before Levi, after Levi did already ma'amar with the wife of Reuven. בית שמאי אומרים, אשתו, אמו, ועלי זו תצא משום אחות אישה. They said, the former wife of Reuven, that Levi now did ma'amar, she remains his wife, meaning he can go ahead and complete the process because they're husband and wife. And the wife of Shimon, she is no longer have the zikah bond to Levi, because that's one of the list of the abomination of prohibition in Leviticus 18, which is achot isha, the sister of the wife. So Beit Shammai hold that the wife of the late Reuven, considering since they have this ma'amar, the same total wife of Levi. So therefore, when Shimon passed, she's totally exempt from the wife of Shimon from the וחליצה and ייבום, because she's the sister of the wife of Levi. So it means she is not achot zkukato of Levi, so he can do ma'amar because it's achot isha. Haleizu, it's come from Ezekiel 36. Haaretz haleizu haneshama. Rabbi Shimon de Tanya. So if she have two brothers, this Yevamah, that is 9 years and 1 day, and each of them cohabited with her, אמר לו רבי שמעון לחכמים, אם ביאת ראשון ביאה, ביאת שני אינה ביאה. ביאת ראשון אינה ביאה, ביאת שני אינה ביאה. So it means, either way you look, that Yevamah is not disqualified to the oldest brother. והביאת בן 9, דיכא מאמר שביו הרבנן. When you have a child or young man 9 years and 1 day by the dry halacha, it's equal the same as ma'amar. And therefore, וכאמר רבי שמעון, אינה ביאה, which means the second one is not considered as, since it was the first one. So it means, according to Rabbi Shimon, that ma'amar has a full pledge of acquisition, and the subsequent order of the other ma'amar carries no value. Now, Rashba challenged that, based on the Gemarrah in Ketubot, page 9. Anyway, the whole idea of subject death is Rabbi Eliezer, the Petach Patuach, etc. There is a Rabbi Akiva Iger on that text in Ktubot 9 that dealing with Sfek Sfeika Mitapech. It's if someone said it's נאמן לא אוסרה עליו, זה פתח פתוח. Anyway, בן עזאי, דתניא, בן עזאי אומר, יש מאמר אחר מאמר בשני יבמים ויבמה אחת, ואין מאמר אחר מאמר בשתי יבמות ויבם אחד. רבי נחמיה דתנן, הוא לא on page 50, רבי נחמיה אומר, אחת בעילה ואחת חליצה, בין בתחילה, בין באמצע, בין בסוף, אין לאחריה כלום. Meaning, regardless if this Yavam cohabited with her before he gave get to a Ma'amar, or after that, or before he was with the second, or after the two, the get or Ma'amar that followed is no effect. Ve'habi'a psula. So, but we said that this qualification of that act of cohabitation, dechema'amar shavyu harabanan, we just said it. They said that it's in that level, which means that if you want to release a get is not enough, he needs to have וחליצה in addition. Vekatane and the Mishnah teach us, according to Rabbi Nehemiah, ein acharea klum, that nothing effective after this. So you see here that is no form of acquisition is effective after levirate betrothal, as levirate betrothal completely acquires the Yevamah.